It's hot.
It is hot out there.
It's going to get hotter.
I know, right?
East Coast, part of the Midwest, having an unseasonable heat wave. We're going to talk about that. And I think, don't do yard work.
I did. I mowed my lawn last night. Like a crazy chick. But listen, it needs to be done, and I waited until it got kind of cooler.
Well, don't do anything today or tomorrow.
I won't, trust me.
Right,
I shouldn't even be working right now. It's so hot.
Well...
Anyway, temperatures climbed to 103 degrees in Minneapolis Tuesday and set a 23-year high. Can you believe it? Ooh, well, Ephraim Graham has that story.
That severe Minneapolis heat is now headed for the New England area, and summer doesn't officially begin until June 21st, about 2 weeks away.
It's so hot that the devil stopped me and asked me for a ride. It's just that hot.
For some, laughter is the only break from the unseasonable heat wave that has Philadelphia's schools shutting down early so students can beat the scorching heat.
Tomorrow sounds like it's going to be a killer.
The heat is killing roads in the Midwest, where streets are buckling from Minnesota to Mississippi.
It's usually on a joint where two pieces have come together, usually is where it happens.
Forecasters predict this heat emergency could last for days, and as temperatures climb above 100 degrees,
it's an $89 service fee.
So do the number of calls to Minnesota air conditioner repair shops.
We can't answer the phones fast enough as the way it goes right now.
It hasn't been this hot in Chicago in 5 years, and it's a 1-2 punch in Sioux City, Iowa, where residents are still dealing with floods and now the heat.
It makes it really hard because we're out here all the time sandbagging.
Today's warm weather watches, alerts, and advisories are posted across the Northeast and parts of the Midwest. Ephraim Graham, CBN News.
Thanks, Esther. We recommend, by the way, that the word is that in Philadelphia and New York, possibly Washington, the temperature will hit 100 degrees today and tomorrow. It's going to be terribly hot, so please stay indoors. Be careful because the heat index is going to be just absolute scorching. Well, let's turn from the domestic to the biggest terrorist threat to the United States. May not come from Iran or Afghanistan, but instead from a little country called Yemen. As far back as 2009, CBN News reported that Yemen was dangerously unstable and a safe haven for al-Qaeda. Eric Stakelbeck has this look at what's happening in Yemen and how it could affect you and me.
Al-Qaeda is on the move in Yemen. The terror group violently seized the town of Zinjibar in southern Yemen late last month, declaring it the capital of its Islamic emirate, and Zinjibar might only be the beginning. Embattled Yemeni President Ali Abdullah Saleh fled to Saudi Arabia for medical treatment after being seriously wounded in a rocket attack on his compound last week. It's unclear whether he will return to Yemen. He left behind a nation on the brink of anarchy as warring tribes and Islamic jihadists seek to take advantage of the growing chaos.
When you look at the indicators throughout Yemen, they're all pointing in the wrong direction. It's a country that's running out of oil. It's running out of water. Sana'a is projected to be the first waterless capital in the world before the end of this coming decade. You have high rates of unemployment.
Then there is Yemen's al-Qaeda problem. Spearheaded by American-born cleric Anwar al-Awlaki, al-Qaeda's Yemen branch has had a hand in several recent attacks on U.S. soil, including the Fort Hood massacre, the attempted Christmas Day underwear bombing, and a plot to blow up cargo planes bound for the U.S.
Now, U.S. officials fear that as Yemen descends into further unrest, al-Qaeda fighters there will be much tougher to track as they continue to make their plans to strike America, Pat.
Thanks, Eric. Eric, what are the chances that al-Qaeda or other radical Islamists will actually take control of Yemen?
Pat, I think in the long term, there is a very good chance that al-Qaeda could come to power in that country. Now, in the short term, al-Qaeda is very smart, they're very savvy, they're very patient. They know if they seize large areas of the country right now, that Saudi Arabia, Yemen's neighbor to the north, could very well get involved. Remember, the Saudis entered Bahrain when it looked like Bahrain was teetering on the brink about 2 months ago. They could do the same in Yemen. So al-Qaeda's smart, they will lay in wait, they're patient. Pat, I'm also keeping an eye on Iran. No one has mentioned the Iran factor in Yemen. There is a radical Shiite population in Yemen. They're called the Houthis. Iran has been funding them. And when Iran sees these chaotic situations, just like al-Qaeda, they can't help but take advantage, Pat, especially when there is a Shia element present like there is in Yemen.
You have pointed out a guy that we hadn't thought too much about, Anwar al-Awlaki, and yet he's rising to prominence. Will he be the main player in Yemen if al-Qaeda takes over?
Absolutely, Pat. This guy is so dangerous for so many reasons, and you and I have talked about him a lot here on the club. This is a guy who was born in America, spent 20 years of his life here, born in New Mexico, educated at Colorado State University, of all places, fluent in English, Pat, and that's what makes him so dangerous. That's how he was able to connect with the Fort Hood shooter, with the Times Square, the attempted Times Square bomber. He had a hand in the underwear bomber last Christmas Day. He breaks down that English language barrier, which enables him, from his Yemen base, to connect with Islamic jihadist American citizens right here on U.S. soil.
I've pointed out a narrow little waterway, the Bab al-Mandeb, that apparently, if there is a possibility of sinking a freighter as it comes across there, those freighters are very slow, and it wouldn't take much to bring one down and actually stop the flow of oil, 3 million barrels a day. Could you talk about that?
Pat, it really wouldn't. And look, we need to look no further than the USS Cole incident. September 2000, 18 U.S. soldiers were killed off the coast of Yemen. This is fertile ground for al-Qaeda in those waterways, as you mentioned, Pat. Another interesting thing here, the Gulf of Aden separates Yemen and Africa. You could see al-Qaeda fighters transiting between Yemen and Somalia, which is another al-Qaeda hotbed right across the Gulf of Aden. And we know the Somali pirates' activities off the coast of Somalia. We could conceivably see a lot of problems in those waterways off the coast of Yemen as well. Great point.
3 million barrels of oil a day could be interdicted. It's very, very serious. Well, Eric, we appreciate you being with us. Follow that one. We want to watch it very closely because I know it's important to all of us. Thank you so much.
Will do, Pat. Thank you.
Well, Wendy Griffith has the rest of our top stories for the CBN Newsroom. Wendy, what do you have?
Pat, Federal Reserve Chairman Ben Bernanke says Washington urgently needs to take care of its massive debt so the U.S. economy can be healthy in the future. Bernanke also says the current economic recovery is weak, but he expects it to keep going without any serious outbreak of inflation.
Overall, the economic recovery appears to be continuing at a moderate pace, albeit at a rate that is both uneven across sectors and frustratingly slow from the perspective of millions of unemployed and underemployed workers.
Bernanke says higher gas prices and the crisis in Japan have been some of the reasons the economy has slowed down, but he expects it to pick up again later in the year. Do you think he's right, Pat?
No, I don't think he's right because he's head of the Federal Reserve, but I think all the bullets are out of his gun. He's fired all the stimulus shots he's got. He's got the interest rate down to zero, at least the short-term bank lending rate. And it just seems like what's going to happen? Well, the administration is clueless about what to do about jobs. They have hammered away at the productive sector over and over and over again. And people don't trust the president. And as a result, they don't trust the future and they don't trust hiring. No business is going to lay out a lot of money to train workers in an economy that's going to collapse. And that's what they're dealing with right now. And it's going to come back to haunt the president in the next election. It's the economy stupid. Wendy.
Pat, President Obama's health care law is back in court today. 26 states are represented in the case against the law. The administration is appealing a Florida court's ruling that found vast portions of it to be unconstitutional. A 3-judge panel of the 11th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Atlanta is hearing the case. Analysts expect an appeal to the Supreme Court no matter which side wins. Conservative and urban church leaders have come together to form a new communion 1,000 churches strong. Paul Strand tells us how they plan to be fiercely evangelistic, politically relevant, and form congregations of great influence in the world.
Urban church members tend to vote Democrat, even if some of their leaders don't see it being in the best interest of their communities. These leaders believe their new group, the International Communion of Evangelical Churches, or ICEC, can realign urban believers and spark economic, even spiritual revival.
Urban America, there's a blight on the land. We've got generations of young people that have family breakdown. We have all kinds of issues of poverty in the land. And the gospel in foreign nations always brings an economic lift, moral standards, and so we believe America may be on the verge of another great awakening.
Where liberal groups like the National Council of Churches have tended to dominate mainline urban denominations, this communion hopes to educate Christians in the power of conservative values. Reverend Aubrey Shines has studied what happens when congregations go into voting booths with more education about candidates and issues.
What we found to be interesting was that the more information they had, the more conservative in their views they became.
I remember the first time I ever voted for president was I voted for Ronald Reagan, and I remember my father calling me Reagan's boy and Uncle Tom and even in my own family. But it took to almost to the death of my father. He became conservative at the end. He understood the principles that he taught me was always conservative principles.
This communion will speak out on political issues, but puts evangelism first.
We're a combined communion of about 1,000 churches already. We'll start more, we'll assimilate more, so our combined efforts with crusades in the nations, with teaching members of our churches to evangelize, not just be a secretary, not just be a lawyer, but wherever you are, you're salt and light to bring people to Jesus.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Washington.
Looks like a very interesting group, Pat.
Well, Harry Jackson is a fabulous guy, and he's spearheading that along with other enlightened leaders. But, you know, there's been a lockstep along the way, and I think the Democrats are taking all the black people for granted. And the next election may prove that they shouldn't do that because these people are waking up.
I think the bottom line is black, white, green, or yellow. It's all about really being informed to the issues and to know what each candidate stands for and what each party stands for.
And so you're informed because you've been here for so long.
I am informed because I am forced to.
A Virginia school system will repost copies of the Ten Commandments. Giles County Schools removed the displays back in December after the ACLU threatened legal action. The group says that they violate separation of church and state, but the Giles County School Board members voted 3-2 to put the commandments back up. The ACLU says they will go forward with plans to file a lawsuit. The Mammoth, Arizona wildfire is forcing more people from their homes. It's the second largest fire in that state's history. Tuesday afternoon, about 2,000 residents of Eager evacuated as the fire threatened to top the ridges surrounding the town. Several other towns have already been evacuated. Fueled by 60-mile-an-hour winds, the Wallow fire has grown to more than 300,000 acres. That's about twice the size of Chicago. It's already consumed about 500 square miles of pine forest and 10 structures. Thankfully, no lives have been lost. And you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website, that's cbnnews.com.